Hello and welcome back. I'm Dr. Barbara O'Neill, and today we're diving into a topic that affects many of us, allergies. If you've been struggling with sneezing, itchy eyes, or skin rashes, understanding the causes and finding ways to combat these symptoms is crucial. Allergies occur when your immune system overreacts to normally harmless substances, known as allergens. These can range from pollen and dust to certain foods and pet dander. Knowing what triggers your allergies and how to manage them effectively can make a significant difference in your quality of life. So stay tuned as we explore the common causes of allergies, how they impact your body, and practical strategies to reduce your exposure and manage your symptoms.
The most common allergens are wheat, dairy, and refined sugar. Dairy milk is excellent milk for baby calves. Got that? Baby calves. And if you give a newborn baby calf the milk in the supermarket, did you know that calf will die? Now, it is true that some people have in their heritage dairy. So if you've got a 5th or 6th generation dairy farmers, they usually can handle a little dairy, but the dairy they can handle is the raw milk straight from the cow. But the milk from the supermarket, I don't know whether anyone can really handle that because it has been altered. And the reason pasteurization happened really was because of dirty dairies. My daughter lives in Wisconsin, and she lives opposite a dairy farm, and she said the dairy's not very clean. And what happens is, if you go, it's a bad smell, and they put those things on the udders, you know, to get the milk out. And sometimes the udders would fall on the floor, and there's manure on the floor, and they just put them on the next udder. Eventually, after about 10 years, they did test the milk and found E. coli in the milk, and the dairy was closed down. Down the road, there's another dairy, and it's spotlessly clean. You could actually eat off the floor in the dairy. It is so clean. And yet when the milk truck picks up the milk, what happens? It all gets thrown in together. My friend is she lives in Africa, and she has her and husband have an orphanage, and they have a couple of hundred orphans, and they started getting babies because a lot of parents died, a lot of mothers died from AIDS, and they found that the babies went well on the soy milk. But there was a group of babies that were not doing well, and it was the Maasai babies. Because what do the Maasai eat? The Maasai eat, they eat corn, but they also eat a lot of meat and milk and blood. And the lady said, I don't know what I'm going to do with these babies, and her husband saying, I'm getting a cow. They got the cow, they milked the cow, they gave the cow's milk to the baby Maasais, and they flourished. Because the Maasai have in their gut enzymes that break down the dairy because they've been eating it for thousands of years. I don't think I have enzymes to break down dairy in my gut. Because when I was a little girl, I grew up in a typical Australian home. I'm 5th generation Australian, Scottish descent, and we just ate sausages, mashed potato, peas, or chops every night of the week, except for Sunday. Their mum would cook the roast lamb, and we just had cereal and milk for breakfast, and that was the average, well, it still is the average Aussie diet. And when I went to school, in our mid-morning break, we all had to drink a bottle of milk. I don't know if that happened in America. So this would be in the 60s, early 60s. Oh, I felt ill all morning after drinking that milk. I can't handle milk. In fact, the current figures in Australia are 60% of people can't handle the dairy milk. Now, there is a reason for that, and as I mentioned, it is in the heritage. Some who are dairy farmers for centuries do have those enzymes to break it down. But what has been found is if, let's take me who can't handle the dairy, let's say I'm drinking a lot of cow's milk because my mother says it's good for me and it's going to build my bones, and I'll have a look at that in a minute too. but I'm feeling ill. What's happening when it gets into my gut? It's not being broken down properly. So it breaks down to a molecule, let's say, that looks like that. It gets into the blood, and the blood sees it as a pathogen, meaning it doesn't recognize it, so it creates antibodies. And these antibodies come along and consume what they see as the enemy. Nothing wrong with that, the body does that. But then these antibodies, because I'm trying not to drink much milk because I can't handle it, they look over and they see my pancreas. And my beta cells in my pancreas, sorry, I'll do this correctly, my beta cells in my pancreas are the same shape. So these antibodies that were created to clean up those molecules because I couldn't break down milk, they come along, and what do they start consuming? My beta cells in my pancreas. In fact, the current figures are 70% of children that have cow's milk in the first year of life can develop type 1 diabetes.
Type 1 diabetes can develop when the immune system mistakenly attacks the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. This can be triggered by various factors, including environmental ones like dairy consumption. In some cases, the proteins in cow's milk may mimic components of the pancreas, confusing the immune system and leading it to target the body's own cells. While some people can handle pasteurized milk without issues, others may have sensitivities or allergies that heighten their risk. If a child has a family history of diabetes or other autoimmune diseases, introducing cow's milk early could potentially increase their risk. It's important to be aware of how dietary choices might affect health and to watch for any signs of intolerance or autoimmune reactions.
But what about the eczema, and what about the asthma? See, when a body cannot handle the cow's milk, one of the ways the body reacts is creates a lot of mucus. And it creates a lot of mucus in the eustachian tubes. And are you familiar with your eustachian tubes? They connect your ears and your mouth and your nose and your eyes. So a lot of mucus is created there, and then congestion builds up in the chest. There's your asthma. These are the children that have to have their adenoids out, their tonsils out. Do you know what your tonsils are? They're the watchmen at the gate. They're just saying, hey, there's a problem. Oh, we'll just take out the watchmen of the gate. We're sick of their loud cries. Now, what's going to tell the body that there's a problem now? You see that? Now, what unfortunately is not often addressed in medicine is this. Why are the adenoids swelling? Why does the asthma keep returning? Why are the tonsils swelling? I get a few emails. Barbara, what can we do for tonsillitis? So I say to them, the first thing is you must stop the dairy and the wheat and the refined sugar. But a word of warning here, it can take up to 2 months before the full effects of stopping it are seen. So a person can eat a slice of bread and it'll be out of the body in 24 hours, but the effect can remain for up to 2 months. One lady said, aha, she said, I stopped for 2 weeks. I didn't see any difference. So she said, I started up again. And one lady said, well, I stopped the dairy, that didn't seem to make a difference. So I went back on that and stopped the wheat. So it all has to be stopped at once. And what I say to people is, don't stop today. Don't stop tomorrow. You've got to go home and seriously assess the kitchen cupboards. Seriously assess the fridge and the freezer. And then you've got to make those adjustments and then start. Otherwise it's too hard. You come home, you're hungry, open the fridge, bread, pasta, everything that you actually don't want to eat. And did you know that hunger is the strongest urge in the human body? And so some of your senses go out the window and you just want to eat. You see that? So it's a good idea to make the changes before you actually take the step. So that's one of the reasons why dairy causes so many problems up in the respiratory, because of the excess mucus that it creates. Did you know in China, tonsillitis was unheard of? Adenoids going out, unheard of. And now, in the last 20 years, the Time magazine says that China's now eating the meat-sweet diet. What's the meat-sweet diet? Very typical to the typical Australian or American diet, which is a lot of meat, a lot of dairy, a lot of sugars, a lot of refined things. Do you know those Chinese children are now getting tonsillitis, adenoids, eczema, asthma, things that were not known of, hardly. And yet now that these are being introduced. And when you think of it, how many Americans have cereal and toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, coffee with tea, coffee with milk, tea with milk and sugar and biscuits. You know, I think the Australian and the American diet in many ways are similar.
The global shift towards diets high in processed foods, dairy and sugars is impacting health in various ways. As more countries adopt these Western eating habits, they're seeing a rise in conditions that were once less common. In China, for instance, the traditional diet was mostly plant-based and low in dairy. But with the adoption of a more Western diet, there's been a noticeable increase in health issues like asthma, eczema, and tonsillitis. This isn't just a trend in China. It's happening in many places where Western-style diets are becoming more common. Eating too much dairy and processed food can increase mucus production and affect the immune system. Reducing or cutting out dairy, refined sugars, and processed grains can help manage or prevent these issues.
Then in the 1950s, this Emma wheat was put through intensive crossbreeding and came up with a hybridized wheat. What was never addressed was the effect of that hybridized wheat on the human body. No one objects to more grain coming so the farmers can pay their bills, and more grain coming to help with the starvation crisis. But what was never addressed was the effect of that grain on the human body. It created an incredibly complex protein or gluten structure, and almost only a cast iron gut can break down that complex structure. So you look at the time frame. Worldwide in the 70s, by the 1990s, this is all the hybridized wheat. I've got a friend who's a physician. She said, Barbara, 40 years ago you never heard of gluten intolerance, notice? Even 20 years ago you didn't hear of much. But today it is so common, isn't it? So many people. All you have to do is to go into a section in the supermarket and look at gluten-free. It's huge. And of course, all the supermarkets have on their shelves are what the public demands. Is that right? There's so many people with the gluten intolerance. It's almost only a cast iron gut that can break that down. And so when the gut can't break it down, again, partially digested molecules are getting into the blood. It increases the mucus coming in the eustachian tubes and lining the gastrointestinal tract are villi, and over the gastrointestinal tract is a thick mucosa wall, and it's made up of Lactobacillus acidophilus. You've heard of those friendly bacteria. Now the cells that line this gut are remade every 3 to 5 days. They're made here, they travel up, and away they go. But if a person has had antibiotics, that knocks off the gut flora. I think we all know that. And if a person is on the statin drugs, those cholesterol lowering drugs, that knocks it off. If a person is on cortisone, that knocks it back. If they're on a lot of painkillers, that knocks it back. And I know it's been in the news a lot lately, how many deaths in America a year to opiates? A lot of Americans, it's not no different in Australia either, are becoming addicted to the over-the-counter pain-killing medication. So this cell lining the gut is a very happy cell because it's nourished by the gut flora. This cell here is a very unhappy it's got gut flora here. This cell here is a very unhappy one. There's no gut flora to nourish it. Now when dairy and wheat break down in the gut and the enzymes aren't breaking it down efficiently, the wheat breaks down to glutamorphine. And the dairy breaks down to caseomorphine. Now what's morphine? It's an opiate derivative. So this is caseomorphine and this is glutamorphine. Let's follow the journey of glutamorphine. It comes here to the happy cell, and because it's well nourished and working well, it can knock off the morphine so any gluto gets in. Same with the caseo. It can knock off the morphine so only caseo gets in. So that person can handle the wheat and the dairy a little better. But if the caseomorphine and the glutamorphine come here, that undernourished cell cannot knock off the morphine. So glutamorphine and caseomorphine are getting into the blood, going to the brain, the opiate receptor sites pick it up, and there are several books showing the link between mental illness and these foods today.
Research is increasingly showing that the morphine-like compounds in gluten and dairy might be linked to mental health problems like depression and anxiety. These substances can affect the brain and lead to mood changes, especially in people with gut issues who can't break them down properly. This could cause inflammation and worsen mental health conditions. As our understanding of how modern farming practices and diet affect health grows, it's becoming clear that reducing gluten and dairy might help some people with unexplained health problems. More research is needed to fully grasp these connections, but adjusting our diets could be a practical step for those struggling with these issues.
What I'll do now is I'll make a list of your totally gluten-free grains. So your gluten-free grains are buckwheat. And buckwheat actually isn't from the grain family, it's from the seed family. And a nice way to get used to buckwheat is buckwheat pancakes. Millet. When you buy millet, buy hulled. Because you can cook millet with the hull on for 2 weeks and it'll still be crunchy. And you don't have budgies, do you? We have budgies in Australia. They're little birds, and you always give them millet, and they put it in their mouth and they throw the hull away and eat the kernel. Millet quinoa, spelt quinoa. That makes a nice breakfast. It's almost like a rice, and nice with applesauce and coconut cream and chopped fruit all the way over it. And it also makes a very nice base for tabbouleh. Now usually tabbouleh, that Lebanese parsley dish, is made with cracked wheat. That's very nice with made with quinoa. Amaranth. Amaranth is a grain that's not very well known, but it is gluten-free, so it's becoming popular. And when you cook it up, it goes like a lump of glue. It's not very nice. But you might do 3/4 millet and 1/4 amaranth. You might do 3/4 quinoa and 1/4 amaranth. You can play around with it a bit. Buckwheat's a very strong flavour. The Polish love it, but a lot of Americans and Australians aren't used to it. So if my grandchildren come, because they love a porridge for breakfast, I will do 3/4 millet and 1/4 buckwheat, and it's quite nice through it like that. So these are your totally gluten-free grains. Now there is another grain that traditionally farmers only ever grew for the cows. But now they're growing it for human consumption because it's gluten-free, and it's sorghum. I think that's how it's spelled. And corn is a gluten-free grain too. But it's pretty important, yes, rice is, to get non-GMO corn. Yep, rice is also gluten-free. So as you can see, you only have to stop one, and there's a whole lot you can eat. And the reason why this is so popular, because of the gluten in it, it makes a very elastic bread and cookies, and they all hold together. Because they have no gluten, it's difficult to make bread out of it, or it'll all just fall apart. So Tristan, who has made a very nice gluten-free bread, I think he puts flaxseed or chia or something in it to make it stick together. And this also is why these are more popular, because they do have a little bit of gluten in them, but it has a less complex protein structure.
Thanks for joining me today. I hope this video has provided you with valuable insights into understanding and managing allergies. Remember, identifying your allergens and adopting effective strategies can make a significant difference in your daily comfort and overall well-being. If you found this information helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content on health and wellness. Feel free to share your questions or experiences in the comments below. Until next time, stay healthy and take care.